Check it out. I bought this Cannondale F500 bike frame at the local bike co-op probably a couple years ago, and I think I paid 40 bucks for it, but it was just in great shape. It already has some stuff here, so it's got like brakes on the front and the back, a crankset, it's got handlebars. I think it did have some 8-speed shifters that I pulled off to use for something else. The crankset's been drilled, I guess, for lightning, so I'm not quite sure about that when we replace it or leave that what it is. But I think I have most of the parts around here to go ahead and build this up into a rideable bike. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to need is wheels. And I have a pair of wheels. I bought these off of Craigslist, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago. I think probably 50 bucks or something. Sitting around, figured I'd find something to do with them. And hey, I found something to do with them. The tires are Specialized Crossroads. I pulled them off of something else. And so I have wheels for the bike. And look at that, it's already starting to look more like a bike. Okay, so when this bike came out new, it was a 24 speed, 8x3 drivetrain. But I have some 9-speed shifters that I've had lying around here that I've been holding on for this project. So I'm going to convert this up to a 27 speed or a 9x3 drivetrain. So let's go ahead and just slide these on here like this. And then before I lock these down, I want to install the grips. So I have some grips here. I'm going to use isopropyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol, and just squirt a little bit in there, shake it around, and then slide the grip on. And yes, I can use air, hairspray, and a lot of other different things, but I'm using alcohol because it is convenient. Like that. And so now that I have the grips in place, I go ahead and slide the shifters over and get them adjusted to where I think I'm going to want them, and then go ahead and clamp these down, and I can always adjust them a little bit later. Like that. So for the rear derailleur, I have a Shimano Dior XT. It's a RDM750. I've had this lying around, but it looks like it should work for this project, so I'm going to go ahead and install it. Like that. Okay, so for the front derailleur, I have a Shimano Dior DX. Looks like a FDM650. So again, I had this lying around. I don't remember where I got this. I get a lot of parts in box lots or whatever, you know, so I'm gonna go ahead and mount this, but it's the right clamp size, which it's 31.8 millimeter clamp here. So let's go ahead and install this on here for right now. And I want to have it mounted so that when the cage swings out, the bottom of the cage is going to just miss the teeth of the largest chainring here by like a couple millimeters. And then I want to have the cage parallel to the chain rings here, so I can kind of get it adjusted, and I might be able to tweak it later, but that looks pretty good, so I'm going to tighten this down. And be careful not to tighten this down too much. You want it tight, but not over tight, because you can actually damage the seat tube if you tighten it down too much. So that actually looks pretty good, though it should swing out more. I'm going to just kind of tweak the limiting screw a little bit, just let it out a little bit. Like this, though I'll do better adjustment when I get the chain installed. Okay, so now I want to go ahead and install a cassette onto the wheel. I've actually bought a brand new cassette because I didn't have one lying around. It goes from like 11 to 34 teeth. So I'll slide this on here. Got another cog here. Just line it up with the splines on the free hub. And the last little one here. Get this fit in there. Got the lock ring And lock ring tool here. Tighten this down, and then I want to torque it down to 40 Newton meters. So Newton meters. And like that. And some people always ask about my torque wrench. This is called a beam torque wrench as opposed to a clicker torque wrench. And I just actually kind of prefer it for doing stuff like this. For heavy duty stuff, I'll use my clicker torque wrench, but most of the stuff on bikes is pretty light, so I actually like this. Okay, so now I need to install and size the chain. So I'm gonna run it up here onto the small chain ring on the front, like this, and then run it onto the back over the small cog on the cassette. And then I need to run it through the derailleur here, like this. And always, when installing chain, make sure that you go on the right side of this little tab there, because if you run over that tab, oh, it's going to be a noisy mess. And so now I need to size the chain. Okay, so now I need to size the bike chain. To do that, I'm going to use a little homemade tool. It's a piece of wire coat hanger. It's bent 2 inches apart here. And I have the chain mounted on the small cog in the back and the small chain ring in the front. And so what I'm going to do is, with this little tool here, I'm going to hook on one side of the chain, and I'm going to hook it between the two outer plates, because there's the inner plates and the outer plates. So I'm going to hook it on one of the links with the outer plates, and then hook it on the other end of the chain here. So kind of pull it together and find the right length for when it's small. Right now, so I have tension, but it's rubbing here. So that chain is still too long. So I'm shortening it up just a little bit. And so now I have a little bit of space here, but I think I might want more space. So I'm gonna go one more link like this. And so now it looks like I got some decent room there, and small. And keep in mind, this is probably not a chain combination that you're actually going to be wanting to ride in, but you want to make sure that the chain can handle this combination, because you never know, as you're shifting, whatever, you might accidentally end up in this, and you don't want to have the chain too long to where all of a sudden it's rubbing and whatever. So anyway, this looks pretty good. So I got some space here. So now what I need to do is check it from the big combination to make sure the chain is not too short. Okay, so now I have the chain mounted on the big cog in the back and the big chain ring on the front. This is not a combination you really want to be riding in, because it's called cross chaining. So like if you're gonna go to the big on the back, go down to a smaller chain ring on the front for that same gearing combination. But you want to make sure that the chain can handle this combination, so in case you accidentally shift into it. What I'm looking at is the curve through the derailleur here, and there is still a little bit of curve going through there. It's right on the edge of where I would not feel good about it. What you want to avoid is if it's going through there and it's almost in a straight line going through there, then at that point the chain is just too short. But there is still a little bit of curve on there. Even though I'd like to have more, it is what it is. So if I lengthen the chain, I get a little more curve here, but then when I go to the small, it's going to be a little bit too long to really accommodate that. So this is what it's going to have to be. Okay, so now I need to break the chain. The little master link that I'm going to be using is going to replace a set of the outer plates here. So I want to break the chain right here. So I'll fit this right on here, and this will push the pin out. Okay, so the little master link that I'm going to be using is called a missing link. It's two little side parts that lock together, and this comes with like KMC chains. I really like these things. They're pretty easy to use, and so I'm just going to slide it through on the one side and then slide it through on the other, and then kind of get rid of this little tool here, and then just kind of get these connected here on each side, and then pull, once they're all the way kind of connected on both sides. Pull the chain apart to lock it into place. And normally I could just pull it apart there, but some of these are a little tighter than others, so they actually make like a little tool that I can fit into here, and it will actually pull the two links apart and lock that in place. So there it's locked. And so now I have the foundations of a drivetrain. So now I want to go ahead and install brake pads. The ones on the back are completely missing, but look at the ones on the front here. They're fairly well worn, so I'm going to replace those too. So I'm going to get started on doing that. And I'll start off by removing these old pads. So I have a new brake pad here, and you want to make sure that you install the correct pad on the correct side. There's a curve to it, and so the curve needs to match the rim, and then you want the long side to be on the back. And so what I'm going to do is just remove this little nut here, and then there's two convex washers and two concave washers, and pull this off here and try not to lose any of the little parts here. And so I'm going to fit this in here like this, and then put these onto the other side. The trickiest part is not to lose any of the things while you're trying to get this thing on. And then tighten the nut here. Okay, so now I'm going to push the pad here into the rim. I want it to be flat against the rim. I don't want it to like have the top part of the pad hitting the rim or the bottom part of the pad hitting the rim. And so I want it to be parallel with the curve of the rim, close to the top of the edge of the rim, but not hitting the tire. So better be a little bit away there. And so when I kind of get it adjusted to where I want it, and I'm kind of pushing the pad into the rim, and I'm going to go ahead and just tighten this down right now for a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I want to adjust it so it's toe in. I want the front part of the pad to hit the rim first, just by a little bit. So I'm going to take a dime and I'm going to stick it under the back part of the brake pad, between the pad and the rim. And then I'm just going to loosen this just a little bit and then tighten it again. And so now the front part of the pad is hitting the rim there. And so now holding the pad so it doesn't rotate, I'm going to tighten this down and then test this to make sure that the pad is not hitting the tire at all. And maybe just a little bit. And so that actually looks good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust, install and adjust all four brake pads just like this. Okay, so now I want to start hooking up all the cables. I'm going to start with the brake cables. I don't have any existing housings, so I need to figure out the length of the housings and cut them all brand new housings. So I got a bit of brake cable housing here, trial fit this. I got a brand new noodle, so put this in here and just kind of estimate the length of it, because I wanted, a decent curve here. So this is going to go through here, maybe a little shorter than that. That actually looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the housing right there. And then clean up the end of the cable here, the housing, and check on this one. This side looks good. And then I need to open up the lining in there. So I use like an awl or like a scribe here, kind of poke this in there, and then it opens up the lining there for the cable. Do it on both ends, like that. And then I'm going to install a ferrule on each end of the housing. Just kind of push this on here like this, and one on that side, just like that. And then I have a brand new brake cable here, so I need to install this on here. So let me see, I'm going to get these little, in the barrel adjuster, get these little slots lined up with this slot here. Then just hook this in here like this, run this through this slot, run it through the slot like that. And so now that's all installed like that. And so now that I have my cable, I'm going to run this through the housing, get the housing seated up into there, and then run the housing down through the noodle. I pull this through, and then run this over into the other brake lever. I could put a little boot on there, but the boots that came with these noodles suck, and I don't have any other noodle, little boots. So I'm just going to go without a boot for right now. I may find some other boots. Okay, so now I'm going to pull the cable here, and I'm going to pull it so it's tight, and then I'm going to let it out just a little bit, kind of hold it, and then test the brake lever to see how much, because I don't want the brake lever to like bottom out here. So get it to where it's about right, and tighten it down a little bit and try it. And try that. That actually looks pretty good. So I'm going to tighten this down and test it. So that's pretty good. I could always adjust the barrel adjuster out a little bit if I want to take out a little bit more slack. And so now I can trim this cable off here. I'm going to just leave about 1.5 inches here and put a little crimp end on and squeeze this on there, keep the cable from fraying, and then I can just tuck this cable back behind here like that. One brake done, though I'm going to still probably try to find some new boots or something. So now I need to cut a bit of housing for the rear brake lever, and so I need a bit of housing to go from here down to this cable stop here, and I have a little shorter piece already here, and so I'm going to put that in there. And what I want to make sure is that when I fully rotate the handlebars as far as going to go, that I'm going to still have some housing there, that it's not going to pull out of there around this bend here. And so I'll have a little extra here. And so I could probably cut it right here and maybe just leave just a little bit extra, maybe just cut 1 inch off of this, and that's probably should work pretty nicely. Do that, clean up there. And so then to test it here, I'm going to put this in here like this, and I'm going to run this to the inside of the front housing like that, so that when it goes around here, it's not going to just pull this in. So that I can fit this in here, just test fit that, and that goes around pretty nicely. I could probably actually take a little bit more off of that, just a hair. So put this in here, put this in here, rotate the handlebars, and that actually looks pretty good. So now I'm going to use my awl here to open up the linings in the housing like that, and then put ferrules on both ends of the housing like this, and just insert this to right here and insert this into right here for now. And so then I need to install a new cable into here. So pull this out, and I'm gonna get the slots in there lined up with the slot over here. Get this into here, run this through here, run this, and then I'll turn these in. And then I can run this into the housing and get it pulled into place like this. Getting there. So now I need a bit of cable housing to run from this cable stop down to the noodle for the breakdown here. So like this, and I'm going to want to leave like a little bit of a bend in there. So let me see if I go here, if I can pull this together here, and just figure out about how much I want. I think I'm going to cut it right there. And then just clean up the end a little bit. And clean up this end. Then test fit this in. So go there, go here. And so that looks pretty good right there. And so now use the awl to open up the lining like this on both ends. Install ferrules on each end. And then I can run the cable into this housing. And then seat this housing into here and run this into the noodle. Get this seated in here. Okay, so now I'm going to run this cable out here through this cable clamp here, and I'll pull this together and tight against the rim and then let it out just a little bit. And then I'm going to test the brake lever to see how much pull I have, and this feels pretty good. This lever is not moving as much as I'd like. I may have to adjust that. And test it again before I clamp it down. And I have good movement on the lever to about what I want to do. It's not bottoming it out. And so tighten this down here like this. Okay, so now I need to adjust this lever because it's not coming out as much as this one. So there's a couple things I can do. There's a little adjustment screw down here. I can go ahead and just tighten this in. I'm going to tighten in about a half a turn, and we'll go on the other side and loosen that one a half a turn. Though this one's actually already pretty well out. So, but I'm going to go ahead and try this and check the lever there, and it's a little bit better. So I'm going to turn this one out just another half a turn and tighten that in one half a turn. And that screw is getting in about as far as it's going to go, but I got good movement. But now another thing that you can do, like, is if you run out of the little screws there, something else you could do is just take the spring and just bend it out a little bit, like that. It's like that. Now I have more movement on this side, so I actually can reverse this process. Take this screw out just a little bit, like that. So yeah, so if the screws aren't going to give you enough adjustment, you actually just kind of physically bend the spring a little bit to give you a little bit more pull. And that actually looks pretty good right there. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut this. Put the little crimp end on here like this. And squeeze that on. And then just tuck this back behind the brake arm like that and test it, and looks good. Okay, so now I need to hook up the shifters, and I also need to cut housings for these. So I'm going to do the rear shifter first. So I need a piece of housing to go from here down to this cable stop down here, and it also has to accommodate rotating the handlebars. So I'm just going to try to get a piece here, kind of rotate the handlebars around. So I'll kind of hold it up against the where it comes out of the shifter, bring it around, and then bring it around down to the cable stop there. And so that looks pretty good right there. It might be a little long, but that's fine. I'd rather have it longer than I need. And so I'm going to cut this right here like this. And then I can use these to kind of squish the ends around, kind of get the lining kind of centered here. I do the same thing on this thing here. And again, I use the little awl to open up the lining in there, like that. And then I'm going to stick ferrules on each end of this piece of housing, like this. And then I can unwrap this cable here. And so then I'm going to run the cable into the housing, get this seated into the shifter here, and bring it down to this cable stop down here, like that. And I'm going to have this back behind the brake cables. Then I can test this by rotating the handlebars here. And so I got a nice, good, clean entry or exit out of there and around. So nice, smooth turnings there. And then run the cable through the guide on the bottom side of the bottom bracket here. And pull that through. And then I need a bit of cable housing to go from this cable stop around to the derailleur here. And so I'm going to put this in here and run this down around here. And so I want it to be a relatively smooth curve here and not like be too sharp of an angle going into the derailleur there. And this actually looks pretty good, so I'm going to cut the housing right here. Again, massage the ends of the cable here so it kind of like gets the lining all kinds of nice and centered. And then open up the lining with the scribe, the little awl, and put ferrules on the end of the housing like this. Okay, so before I start hooking up the cable, I want to adjust these limiting screws, because right now the high limiting screw is a little bit off because it's over on the second cog, kind of go down to the first cog and back over. So I need to adjust the high limiting screw out just a little bit so that it can come down farther. Let me see, is that the high or is this the high? Oh, that's the high. So adjust it so it comes over down to the small cog and rests comfortably on that while I'm pedaling and not trying to come up. And that looks pretty good. Then I can also try to adjust the high or the low limiting screw, kind of push this over, and I want to make sure that the thing is not going to be trying to come off of that, and it is trying to come off of that a little bit. So I'm going to tighten the low limiting screw in and push over. Okay, so it won't let me cut, it's barely, so that's pretty close. I want to just back it off a little bit, so I want to make sure that it can make it up onto the big cog pretty freely, but not past that. And a little bit more. And that seems pretty good. So it kind of limits how far the derailleur will push the chain one way or the other. And so now I want to install the cable into this little bit of cable housing here that I cut. Come out through there. And then this is going to fit into this cable stop right there and bring this around into the barrel adjuster here like this and get this seated into here like this. Bring this up here and I'm going to turn the barrel adjuster all the way in and then turn it out about a turn and a half, maybe 2 turns. That'll give me some room to adjust it either way, so in or out. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get this into the little cable clamp there. I'm going to pull the cable taut and then tighten this down onto the cable like that. Now I want to go ahead and test the shifting. So I'm going to shift up. It went up 1 cog, up, 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 up. It started to go up 2 cogs a little bit. So I'm going to turn this in a little bit. Up, up, down. And it's struggling to come down to the next cog, so I'm going to turn that in just a little bit. That's why I kind of adjusted this so I can give me room to turn it back in if I need to, which is what I need to do in this case. So maybe in just a little bit more. In, down, 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 up, up, down, down. And that looks pretty good. I might just turn it in just a little bit more there. So up, 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 down, down, down. So that looks pretty good. I mean, I could probably also maybe feather this a little bit when I actually get it on the road to test, but it's pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and trim the cable here and put a crimp end on here like this, and done with that. Okay, so I also need a piece of cable housing to go from the barrel adjuster on this shifter down to the cable stop down here, and it's going to be the exact same length as the cable housing. They went from this shifter down to the other cable stop. So I actually cut a piece of cable housing the exact same length, and so I already have it set up here with ferrules on it. So I'm going to go ahead and run the cable into it and get the cable seated into here, and then down into the cable stop down in here, just like that. And then I'll just kind of get it over there. Okay, so I'm going to run the cable here into the cable guide underneath the bottom bracket. Just feed it through here, and then I'm going to feed it up into this little tube up here. And it'll come up like this, and I'll just pull the cable up like this. So now before I hook up the cable to the derailleur, I'm going to go ahead and adjust this barrel adjuster here for the shifter. I'm going to turn it out a couple turns, and that'll give me some room to play because I can move it out or in to fine tune the cable adjustment on the derailleur from here. I have the chain shifted to the big cog in the back. It's on the small chain ring in the front. I have the shifter shifted down to 1, and I think I have the derailleur installed, pretty well, to where if I go out here, it just misses the big chain ring here by a couple millimeters, and it looks like it's parallel to the chain rings here. There's usually going to be a bit of trial and error on getting these things adjusted with the cable. It's a lot easier on like a road bike where you only have 2 gears, but when you get 3, all of a sudden it gets a little trickier. Part of the trick is getting it so when you're shifted into the middle ring and you're in the middle cog on the back, that the chain is in the middle of the cage there, so that kind of helps. But I'm going to get this just cable installed here and see how this goes. So let's give it a shot. Shift up. Okay, went to the middle ring there, fine. Big ring, that's good. Down here and down here, so all that looks pretty good. I'm going to shift to the middle cog on the back and shift up again. So that looks pretty good. And actually, it looks like the chain is pretty well centered in between the cage there, while it's on the middle ring here and the middle cog in the back. So that's good. So then shift it up. And that looks pretty good. So then I'm going to go ahead and shift it to the small cog in the back and go through these gear changes. Down, down, up, up. That looks pretty good. The chain's rubbing a little bit here, so what I might do is, I don't know if that's a limiting screw. You just loosen this a little bit and maybe tighten or move that little adjuster up on the shifter out a little bit and see if I can get the cage to move a little bit away from the chain, but I also don't want it to rub up here either. So it is a little bit farther away. So let's go through the gearing again. And that actually looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and trim the cable. Okay, so I'm going to trim the cable, leave it just a little bit on here, and get a crimp end installed on here. like that, and I'm going to bend this up just out of the way so it's not going to come up and hit, you know, your leg or the crank arm as it goes by. So that looks good. Okay, it didn't have a seat post when I got it, so I could use my seat post gauge to measure the inside of the hole, but a simpler method was just go online and Google Cannondale F500 and find out what size of seat post it came with. The things I found said it came with a 27.2 millimeter seat post, so I have one here, and that fits in nice and smoothly. So what I'm going to do is put a little bit of grease around here, thin coating, run this into the seat tube, and clamp this like that. I installed a saddle and some bottle cage screws, but I'm still looking at maybe installing a dropper seat post and maybe overhauling the head shock, but that'll be in an upcoming video. Be sure to subscribe and click the little bell so you get notified when those videos come out. I'm still looking at maybe replacing this crankset there, but I'm thinking it's looking pretty good at this point. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. Well, I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.